the increasing of the Philippines. The healthcare industry is experiencing transformative change. The increasing demand and rising costs for healthcare-related services by an aging world population are driving all aspects of the healthcare industry to reevaluate existing and to innovate new processes and solutions to cost-effectively meet the growing needs. HEMAP is an integral part of this transformation. In an ever-expanding digital world, electronic protected health information is proving to be invaluable. This data is securely recorded, stored, and utilized by healthcare providers, payers, and pharmaceutical entities in a myriad of ways, from revenue cycle management aspects to clinical decision support services. Today's enhanced data analytics initiatives have contributed greatly to significant improvements in the quality and cost of care. Enterprising leaders across all industries recognize and for over a decade have capitalized on the capabilities that the Philippines provides. The combination of highly skilled and motivated workforce, competitive costs, strong government support, and a robust infrastructure have propelled the Philippines into the #1 destination in professional voice services to the world. At the heart of this successful growth is the Philippine Allied Health Professional. With an intrinsic culture of care and unparalleled clinically trained resources, the Philippines is the destination for access to a young, motivated workforce that adapts seamlessly into the digital age of information and utilization. Keeping up with the constantly evolving healthcare industry and capitalizing on all the benefits of technological advancements require a partner with proven industry expertise, innovative thinking, and access to properly trained personnel and a strong commitment to excellence. Members of HEMAP possess all these attributes and more. The Healthcare Information Management Association of the Philippines. We care like no other.
We remain strong, independent, and enduring despite the challenges of the unprecedented COVID-19 health crisis. Our plans are in place to restart the economy by stimulating demand and production activities. A Philippine economic stimulus package is being prepared at Congress to augment what we have all prepared to help the affected sectors, particularly the companies and their workers. We shall ensure that jobs are kept to sustain the income of people that will bring back demand. Moreover, we are positioning the Philippines as a complementary host country to target companies in the global manufacturing and service industries. But as we reopen our economy, we need to deepen investor confidence in the Philippines. That's why we are removing uncertainties for investors by pushing for greater liberalization in the country and passing important tax reform measures. We have the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises Act, or CREATE. CREATE in particular aims to boost the Philippine business community with a 5 percentage point cut in corporate income taxes, immediately bringing it down from 30% to 25%. We shall likewise ensure stability in the supply chain and ensure the health of B2B market for goods and services. Our country remains one of the top places to invest in the world despite the global pandemic. According to the CEO World Magazine last February 2020, the Philippines was ranked as the 7th best country in the world to invest in or do business. Meanwhile, the Economist ranked us last May 2020 as 6th best among emerging economies and the best among those ranked from Southeast Asia in terms of economic, fiscal, and financial management. We entered the year 2020 as the 2nd fastest growing economy in ASEAN and one of the fastest growing markets in the world. Our economy rode on the strong growth momentum that we had painstakingly built with game-changing structural, economic, and financial reforms. We also have an aggressive infrastructure development program dubbed as the Build, 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 and we have free trade agreements and generalized system of preference or GSPs in several key markets that keeps us on investors' radar. With the international business community's continued confidence in the Philippines, we can jumpstart our country's economy to push us towards post-pandemic recovery and global excellence. We want to reiterate our assurance to the international business community that we are ready to assist them in their endeavors, whether setting up in the Philippines or expanding their current operations. Also constant is President Rodrigo Duterte's assurance that there will be no corruption here and you can expect your investments to be safe and secure. As Filipinos continue to be united in the face of the pandemic, the Department of Trade and Industry remains more committed than ever to build a stronger, healthier, and more inclusive nation.
Hello, and thank you for taking the time to attend today's webinar on Philippine IT business process outsourcing opportunities, global business processes powered by the Philippines. This webinar is brought to you by the Philippine Department of Trade and Industry in collaboration with the IT and Business Process Association of the Philippines, commonly referred to as IBPAP, and the Healthcare Information Management Association of the Philippines, also known as HIMAP. We have three industry experts with us today. Dr. CEFERINO RODOLFO, who is the Undersecretary of the Department of Trade and Industry, as well as the Managing Head of the Board of Investments for the Philippines, along with Mr. Ray UNTAL, the President and CEO of IBPAP, and rounding out our trio of expert presenters is Mr. Rogelio Salazar Jr., the President of HIMAP. And to widen the perspective, we'll be joined by Ms. Jessica Shields, the Head of International Business Operations and GBS Head for Dexcom, a leader in diabetic care technology. Ms. Shields will provide us with an on-the-ground operator's view of doing business in the Philippines, the Filipino workforce, and operating during the pandemic. In addition to these presenters, we will start the event with a special message from the Ambassador of the Republic of the Philippines of the United States to America, the Honorable Jose Manuel Romualdez. And let's not forget today's moderator, yours truly. I am Jeff Williams, 17-year resident of the Philippines, past chairman and current member of the HIMAP Board of Trustees, as well as the co-founder of Genfinity, a consulting agency that assists our clients in establishing and enhancing clinical operations in the Philippines with our unique support as a service model. We have a lot to cover today, so please allow me to introduce our guest speaker. Ambassador Romualdez formally assumed the office as Philippine Ambassador to the United States of America on November 29th, 2017, after being appointed by President Duterte in July of the same year. The ambassador is well known for his advocacies in further strengthening the Philippine-U.S. relations, particularly on the bilateral strategic and economic partnerships with the U.S. government and industry. Prior to his appointment, Ambassador Romualdez has had many years of extensive experience as a media practitioner and business executive. He used to be the Chief Executive Officer of Stargate Media Corporation and publisher of People Asia magazine. He was president of the Manila Overseas Press Club and vice president of Rotary Club of Manila. Ambassador Romualdez writes columns for the Philippine Star, and all his columns have a wide following of readers both in the Philippines and abroad. Ladies and gentlemen, the Ambassador of the Republic of the Philippines to the United States of America, the Honorable Jose Manuel Romualdez.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jeff Williams, for that kind introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening from Washington, D.C. I do hope all of you are now keeping yourself healthy and safe, especially now that we are seeing a surge of coronavirus infections both here in the United States and the Philippines. While the environment for business will continue to face challenges in the next few months, it is good to see that everyone is cautiously working to restart the world's economies while adjusting to a new way of life for most of us. I would like to first take the opportunity to welcome Undersecretary Perry Rodolfo, and thank you and your team for the DTI officers here in the United States for organizing this webinar. He will be speaking on the post-COVID situation in the Philippines and what the government and industry have been doing to restart the economy. USEC Rodolfo's last trip to Washington, D.C. was sometime in 2018, and I would like to welcome you back here once the global situation normalizes once again. Since the pandemic started a few months ago, our government early on understood the importance of keeping communication lines open with our investors and friends here in the United States. Since April, key senior officials from the Philippine government conducted webinars with our U.S. partners, including our Secretaries of Finance, Secretary of Trade, and Agriculture. I also have had the engagement with the American Chamber of Commerce, the U.S. ASEAN Business Council, and a number of U.S. think tanks and companies to talk about how the Philippines is addressing the effects of COVID-19.
I just put it here. Thank you.
Tonight, we continue our engagement with the U.S. business community by presenting to you some of the opportunities that the Philippines has to offer in the areas of information technology and business process outsourcing. As we've all seen in the last few months, the coronavirus pandemic has brought about many changes in our lives. One that has been very noteworthy is the increased use of technology. Schools shifted to distance learning and online classes by using technology portals such as Google Classroom, for example. And many traditional retailers increased their online presence to service their customers' needs, and a good number of health providers shifted to telemedicine, allowing patients to consult from the comfort and safety of their own homes. Others might say that the pandemic has in some respects even accelerated the world's adoption of technology and digitalization. The Philippines has for many years been a frontrunner in the IT and business processing outsourcing space. From its humble beginnings as a small industry in the early 2000s, the IT industry now employs around 1.3 million Filipinos and generated revenues of about $26 billion in 2019. In addition, the industry has had a multiplier effect in the Philippines through increased consumer spending, the opening of allied businesses such as restaurants and convenience stores, and more opportunities for our fresh graduates. The IT industry has also contributed to the establishment of a second and third wave cities, thereby spreading development to other parts of the country outside the capital. I can tell you that the Philippines does everything: customer service, software development, healthcare information, management, and animation are just some of the many of the work that is being done here in the Philippines. Our mastery of the English language, a young and dynamic workforce, and our deep connection to the United States are just some of the advantages offered by the Philippines in this sector. Tonight, we are fortunate to have Mr. Ray UNTAL, the President of the IT and Business Process Association of the Philippines, and Mr. Roger Salazar, the President of the Healthcare Information Management Association of the Philippines. These two gentlemen will be talking about the Philippine IT industry adapted to the changes brought about by the pandemic and how in a few short months they have transitioned to almost full work capacity in this very challenging global environment. They will also discuss what the Philippines has to offer to U.S. companies that are looking for outsourcing opportunities, especially in these times when cost and efficiency are key considerations for many businesses that are restarting their operations. I do hope that you will find this webinar useful, and I wish all of you a very good and productive evening. Thank you, and have a good evening to all.
Thank you, sir, for those very insightful words, and I'm very sure we will indeed find this webinar very useful. So thank you again. On to the first of our three featured presenters. DTI Undersecretary CEFERINO RODOLFO leads the crafting and implementation of Philippine industrial policy and international trade negotiation agenda. He is currently the Undersecretary for Industry Development and Trade Policy Group of the DTI and Managing Head of the Board of Investments. He also sits as a member of the board of various national government agencies, such as the Philippine Economic Zone Authority, National Power Corp, Film Development Council of the Philippines, Philippine Center for Economic Development, among others. Undersecretary Rodolfo, or USEC Perry, also chairs the committee that coordinates 18 investment promotion agencies across the country. Presenting updates on the business climate and opportunities, please welcome the Undersecretary of the Department of Trade and Industry and Managing Head for the Board of Investments of the Philippines, Dr. CEFERINO, RODOLFO.
Good day to everyone, Ambassador Babes Romaldes, Ray, Jeff, and Jessica, and to all our friends. Again, good day. Thank you for this opportunity to share with you some updates on the Philippines. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. My key messages for this for today would be: first, the Philippines had strong pre-COVID economic fundamentals. We beat the bullet as early as March 16. That has now allowed us to open up, where also BPOs, even at the time of our enhanced community quarantine, continued to operate under work from home arrangement or on-site. We really expect to have a sharp V-shaped recovery starting 2021. Now, Philippines has strong economic fundamentals, and this is helping us to address the pandemic. Next slide, please. You would see that Philippine economic growth from 1985 has grown by, Philippine economy has grown by 5.3%, by 5.3 times since 2000, and 1.4 times since 2015. In fact, if you look at the GDP per capita of the Philippines in 2019, we were already at $3,400. This year, we would have made it to $4,000, allowing us to become a higher middle income economy. Next slide. But more important than that, you would see that our poverty incidence has declined remarkably. We were initially targeting to reach the poverty incidence of 16%, 17% by 2020. However, we reached that 2 years earlier in 2018. Next slide. Now, with the global pandemic, Philippines beat the bullet early on. That's now allowing us to open up. Next slide. What do we mean by this? If you look at in terms of the definition of terms in the Philippines when it comes to levels of openness, the strictest quarantine regime in the Philippines is called the enhanced community quarantine, while the most open is the modified general community quarantine. For the Philippines, in March 16, we adopted the enhanced community quarantine for the whole of Luzon. Right now, the National Capital Region is under general community quarantine, and we hope that by within 2 weeks, we will be at the modified community quarantine regime. Now, the priority had been for the past 100 days to save lives. And very important, all of the things that we have done has been able to avert some 171,000 deaths. And the death rate in the Philippines has been reduced from a high of 17% to right now it is at 3.5%, or a total of 1,244 deaths as of June 28. Next slide. Now, we have used the 100 days of ECQ time wisely to improve the health system capacity. This slide shows us in terms of how we have improved the health system capacity. From the tests that we are conducting, to the PPE sets that we have provided to our frontliners, to the capacity of hospitals to cater to COVID patients. Next slide, please. Now, even during the strictest community quarantine regime, or the ECQ, what has happened is that, okay, almost everyone was told to stay home, but exceptions were allowed, including for exporters, our manufacturing exporters, and for BPOs. BPOs were allowed to operate under on-site accommodation or to deploy work-from-home arrangements. Ray Untal will be sharing with us later on how much of BPOs were able to continue operating despite being in the enhanced community quarantine regime. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, what is very important also is that amidst the lull, amidst the quarantine regimes that we have been experiencing, what has happened is that businesses, particularly those strategic projects in infrastructure, in telecoms, have continued to operate and continued to implement their projects. What we are seeing now is that for moving forward, what we are seeing is that a gradual but definite removal of the restrictions. Next slide. This is very important. What we are seeing also is that the Philippines has ramped up its testing capacity from basically nothing when we started the quarantine regimes. Our capacity for testing is now at 16,000 per day. But the objective is to increase this further to 32,000 by end of July. Next slide. Now, we are also seeing an increasing number of COVID-19 cases. But as I mentioned, this is really a reflection of the higher testing capacity. Because what is also important is that death rates have fallen from, as I mentioned earlier, 17% death rate to now it's just about 3.5%. Next slide. Now, it's also important to note that positivity rate, or the number of positive cases for the test that we have been undertaking has been falling. Where our target is to really have a positivity case of less than 5%. Next slide. Now, during this general community quarantine, all of these businesses that you are seeing on the slide are now allowed to operate 100%. Next slide. Now, but while they are allowed to operate, we do recognize that there are certain constraints that limit their capability to operate at 100%. Either because there are limitations in terms of public transport. Next slide, please. So this slide would show us the actual levels of operational capability of the economy under the different quarantine regimes, from the ECQ to the GCQ to the modified general community quarantine. What is very important here is that role that public transportation plays. Next slide. And this is where the concentration will also be for the next 2 weeks. We'll be already seeing gradual opening of public transport. If you go now to the Philippines, in NCR, in southern Philippines, you would already see public transportation plying our roads. Next slide. Okay. Now, very important also is to see how ADB, how World Bank is seeing what the Philippines growth would be in this year. Philippines is actually at the middle of the pack. Of course, Vietnam is ranking, is projected to have a 4.1% growth rate. Indonesia would probably be -1%. Philippines would probably have a decline of 3.8%. But we are at the middle of the pack when it comes to growth rate in Southeast Asia. Next slide. Now, what are we doing to address the decline in the GDP? Very important would be the stimulus package that the executive branch and the legislative branch of government are currently in discussion. In the House of Representatives, the Accelerated Recovery and Investment Stimulus for the Economy, or the ARISE bill, has already passed third reading. It would provide for 1.3 trillion pesos worth of post-pandemic stimulus package, covering the areas that you are seeing on the screen. Next slide. There is an equivalent stimulus package that is also being discussed in the Senate. This one will extend the current Bayanihan, or the current emergency powers that we are implementing to fight the pandemic. It will have a total amount in terms of actual pesos, but it will lead to lower GDP to deficit ratio. Overall, what we are seeing is that if the Senate version is passed, that will allow the government to access lower cost funds and preserve more stable macroeconomic environment. So it will be arranged between the Senate version and the House version when it comes to stimulus package. Next slide. Okay. So, but this is very important now. What we are seeing is that businesses have taken advantage of the lull provided by the quarantine regimes. Under the Board of Investments, our registered approved investments have actually risen. In the first half of 2020, our track record is that we are 112% higher in terms of approved investments compared with the same period of last year. And most of these investments have gone to infrastructure, energy, transport. Very important sectors when you look at modernization of the Philippine economy moving forward. Also very important, we have seen investments when it comes to making the Philippines as a hub for quality, medical grade, personal protective equipment, such that right now we are in the position to export PPEs to other countries. Also, just very tangible examples. One of our projects that we have registered last year have continued on to implement a 60,000 kilometer fiber optic network nationwide, even during the quarantine period. Also, very important, the manufacturing support facilities, like for instance, the telecoms tower and also the poles that are needed by the third telco, but which we registered last year, have continued on with their operations. Also, we are also seeing a project that would implement satellite-based community connectivity solution with high degree of manufactured local content that will be implemented in the country within this year. Next slide. So all of this shows that during the quarantine period, what we have done is really to take advantage of this so that the Philippines can be a more modern economy and would be better suited when it comes to infrastructure to host BPO businesses. This will complement the demographic sweet spot and rich talent pool that the country currently has. Next slide. Very important also is that what our good track record when it comes to managing our inflation rate continued on. Of course, initially, during the first month of the quarantine period, there was a slight uptick when it comes to inflation rate, but we are now at 2.1% inflation. I'm mentioning this because this is very important, together with the continuous investment in infrastructure, together with the enviable position of the Philippines of being in a very good demographic sweet spot, together with this low inflation regime, next slide, would really allow us to be very competitive when it comes to offering salaries for BPOs. Next slide. Next slide. Very recently also, just 2 weeks ago, the government has also proclaimed new IT centers and parks. Next slide. Next slide. So Ray, Jeff, and Jessica would be talking about opportunities in the IT-BPO space. But let me wrap up by again summarizing the key messages that I want you to take with you after this presentation. Next slide, please. Okay. Next slide. Okay, Philippines, we have very strong pre-COVID economic fundamentals. We bit the bullet earlier on, which will now allow us to open up the economy and then undertake a very V-shaped recovery by 2021. So we invite you to take advantage of this economic recovery and invest in the Philippines in the BPO sector. So thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you, Undersecretary Rodolfo. A very engaging presentation that validates that with the right business environment, opportunity can be identified in adversity, even as extreme as a global pandemic. So it's very encouraging to see that the actions that are being taken by government, we appreciate that. And we'll move on to our next speaker. But before I get to that, I would like to point out that questions may be sent through the chat feature. They'll be addressed either during the Q&A session, time providing, or directly replied to after the session. So please ensure we have your contact information when you post your questions. So let's go on to our next presenter. Mr. Ray UNTAL plays the crucial role of being the voice of the Philippine IT-BPM industry. One of his key roles is to advocate for the Philippines' unique value proposition in order to attract investors and locators to the country. He also works passionately with key stakeholders in the academia and government to help sustain the growth of the sector globally and domestically. To enlighten us on how the resilient and tenacious Philippine IT-BPM industry is managing in the new normal of COVID-19, the President and CEO of IBPAP, Mr. Ray UNTAL.
Thank you, Jeff, and good afternoon and good evening, everyone. I guess before I start, I just would like to say thanks to Ambassador Romualdez and Yusek Perry for hosting us today. Of course, special thanks as well to my friends in the industry, Mr. Roder Salazar, as well as our host, Jeff Williams. I'm sure there's a lot of interest in this group in terms of how the industry have dealt with the COVID crisis. And I promise that I will spend enough time on that later. In the meantime, and if we can move on to the next slide, please, allow me to briefly reintroduce the IT-BPM industry here in the Philippines by giving you a brief history of its evolution. It always cracks me up when I see this because it reminds me of my own career. Exiting the university in the late 90s, there were quite a few IT companies that want to join. And the scale of operations then is very much different from what we have now. And as you can see here, in the 90s, we also saw quite a number of multinationals opening themselves up to do shared services, capabilities, and functions for their regional and international operations. I think it wasn't a significant leap on their part to discover that beyond technology, there are several other disciplines that Filipinos are great at, and they quickly took advantage of that and scale. Now, in the early 2000s, actually late 90s, early 2000, with voice over IP becoming quite common, we saw the explosion of the contact centers and subsequently the BPOs who also came here to deliver services. And as we progress through the late 2000s and leading to where we are at now, we've seen many more of these large multinationals, in fact, setting up huge captives here and third-party operators looking at the Philippines as a premier destination for outsourcing services. Over the course of this couple of decades, we have likewise seen tremendous growth. We were registering in the mid-teens in terms of CAGR, and that allowed us to scale our operations to what it is now. And as Ambassador Romualdez pointed out a while ago, we are now in excess of 1.3 million direct employment, with obviously us providing indirect employment as well to many ancillary industries. Next slide, please. And while 2019 seems to be a long time ago from where we are now, I just wanted to just very quickly look into this and share with you that 2019 was likewise a pretty strong year for the industry, where we registered close to 6.6% growth in terms of headcount and another 7% in terms of revenue, exceeding the $25 billion milestone that we were all shooting for. Now, growth in 2019 was driven by large incumbents, the large third-party operators who continued to expand. But likewise, we saw quite a bit of expansions in healthcare. And I think it's fitting that we are covering that today because we did see quite a bit of growth in that area with some new setup getting into the picture. Likewise, we saw a number of captives coming from multinational companies expanding their shared services footprint here. And last, if you look at the creative sector, specifically animation and gaming, they've had their fair share of growth as well. Now let's move on to the exciting part of this presentation as I introduce you to what we have done during the crisis. Yusek Perry pointed out a while ago how BPO in fact continued to operate in the face of pandemic, and a lot of credit really goes to our government for identifying and highlighting the need for the BPO sector to be recognized as an essential business. That allowed us to operationalize two work streams, the on-site skeletal model as well as the work from home capability And I still vividly recall 3 months ago when we had to do a massive mobilization exercise, enabling immediately 50% of our workforce. So for Metro Manila, as an example, that easily translated to us having to mobilize 500,000 employees. In certain cases, and while we were given a week to get this operational, some companies, in fact, had to mobilize. One company in particular had to mobilize in excess of 5,000 workstations in a single day. And that's a huge exercise, very challenging. And while we had always been proud in terms of the number of BCP models that we are executing here, anticipating different crises, the scale and ambiguity that we had to deal with in the face of this pandemic was simply unprecedented. And it was likewise true globally. And literally, we had to rewrite our playbook as we went along. And again, a lot of credit goes to the support extended by our friends in the government, colleagues in government, including USIC Perry, DTI, PEZA, DICT, and many others. We were able to increase and further optimize our operations such that by the time we hit June, we were already running at 85% productive capacity, which is really a great testament to our resilience in the face of pandemic. And as we start to normalize, and we continue to work with our friends again in the government so that we can address some gaps in public transportation. And in the meantime, we are helping out by providing our own shuttles for our employees. But with the opening up of public transportation, we anticipate that we should be operating closer to 90% now. And while I will not say that we are business as usual at this point, I think from a performance standpoint, relatively speaking, to be operational at that high percentage at this point is quite an achievement. And it's also a pleasant surprise in my case to see that during the pandemic phase, when we were on ECQ, quite a number of our companies continued to expand. While they stopped for a while as they dealt with the crisis, 2 weeks, 3 weeks into the ECQ, we started seeing quite a bit of virtual recruitment and enablement because of spikes as well and packets of growth that we have seen in the various sectors. In closing, I think the crisis has really shown the tremendous resilience of the Philippines IT-BPM industry in the face of this pandemic that we have just dealt with. We are poised to continue to grow, and we are looking forward for more partners to carry us forward to the next year and ahead. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Ray. That was a very informative presentation that validates that the Filipino spirit will not be dampened, and that with government, industry, and the people all working together, tasks that may seem impossible can not only be accomplished, but accomplished quicker and better than ever even possibly imagined. So let's go on to round out now our trio of our main presenters. Roger is the president of the Healthcare Information Management Association of the Philippines, HIMAP. It is the Healthcare Business Process Outsourcing Association that forms parts of the larger Information Technology and Business Process Association of the Philippines, IBPAP. Prior to his role, Roger was president and country lead for Optum Global Solutions in the Philippines. Roger has over 30 years of experience in the various industries such as manufacturing, food processing, export agriculture, working not only in the Philippines, but in Indonesia, Latin America, and the United States. In addition, Roger graduated with an AB Economics degree from the University of Philippines and an MBA from Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania. Providing insight in the capabilities and flexibility of the Philippine HIM support industry, the president of HIMAP, Mr. Rogelio Salazar Jr.
Hello, good evening and good morning. Jeff, thank you very much. Want to also take the opportunity here to thank Ambassador Romualdez, Yusek Perry, Ray, thank you very much. Later, we'll be talking to Jessica and Jeff for moderating the session. I wanted to get a chance to share with you, specifically in the healthcare BPO industry, what we've done through the years and how we've responded to this pandemic that we're going through. Next slide, please. Just a little background on the Healthcare Information Management Association of the Philippines, or what we call HIMAP. We actually started 2 decades ago. We started out as a medical transcription association. That's where healthcare started in the Philippines, and has then moved and migrated towards higher value business processes. Ray shared with you a history of how the industry has grown in the Philippines. Our healthcare sector was one of the late starters that got into the game. Many of the players, healthcare players across the world, were outsourcing their work to the Philippines through third-party players. It was only much later, maybe about 10 years back, that many of the global in-house centers started to look at the Philippines as an area to build their presence and increase their capability. And that's how, from medical transcription, we migrated and transformed as an association and as an industry towards more higher value business processes. Next slide, please. Here, I'll tell you a little bit more about the HIMSS industry, the revenue and the headcount forecast. Here, you will note through the years, we have become a significant value contributor to the industry. You will note that the revenue growth is at a much higher rate than the FTE or employee or employment growth. That is primarily because most of the processes have migrated towards higher value. We originally started as an industry taking very simple calls, very simple processes, and now have migrated towards more complex, more, how would you say, more developed and more mature processes in many different sectors, whether that's payer, that's provider, or even the pharmaceutical and technology sectors. Next slide, please. Here you have that in detail and how the Philippine healthcare or life sciences services represent as a portion of the global revenue and global headcount of healthcare. Next slide. Over the next few years, we foresee the healthcare sector in the Philippines continuing to grow at a much faster rate than the industry as a whole. Being a late starter in the game of BPO, of business process outsourcing, that growth will primarily be led not only by third-party players, but also more global in-house centers looking at the Philippines. There have been many who have started, and we now see a wave of new players looking to establish and build their own operations in the Philippines to complement what they have previously been outsourcing to third-party players in the Philippines through the years. Next slide, please. Here we have a little bit of over 50 to 60 different business process groups that are being done in the Philippines over the years. We have a combination that started out as primarily payer processes and technology. We've also been able to see a lot of growth on the provider side, where we expect more and more through the years. On the pharmaceutical and pharma, whether that's pharmacy benefit management or pharmaceutical companies, we also see that. Over time, we foresee this to grow. We see many of these processes being automated with the help of technology. Technology is there. That's always been a key component. We see analytics being developed in the Philippines, all the more use of many different processes such as augmented reality, gamification, and many others trying to take advantage of the combination of technology, analytics, and clinical processes. That is an area where we see significant opportunity through the years and see the growth developing. Next slide, please. Just a little background on the workforce in the Philippines. There are approximately 500,000 graduates or more in the Philippines every year. Healthcare sector represents about a little less than 50,000 graduates a year. There are so many passers of our local nurse licensure exams, and of course our pharmacy taking the board exams. Also, to share a point of view with regards to the USRN or US Registered Nurse exams called the NCLEX, you will see the Philippines as a significant participant and contributor to the total NCLEX pool. We foresee this to continue through the years as the demand of our healthcare professionals continue, not only in our country or in the United States, but throughout the world. It has been used as a significant standard to really build and develop capabilities with regards to the USRN academies that are in the different parts of the Philippines. It's just, this chart just basically shows the list of the different members we have at the HEMAP or Health Information Management of the Philippines. Our membership composed not only of business process outsourcing players, but also the support industries and support businesses that help build this ecosystem that we have for the business process outsourcing industry. The combination of technology companies, a combination of recruitment and staff augmentation companies, training organizations, and so forth. It has really, through the years, built an environment where companies are helping and working together, collaborating to be able to support our business processes and the different healthcare industries in the Philippines. The next slide, please. Very much related to what on this slide, we'll talk a little bit more about how the Health Information Management Association and the different members have responded. Ray has been very kind enough to show us a timeline of how things have happened through the years. I mean, through the months here on how our companies have prepared. We knew that the quarantine kicked in around middle of March, but since then we've been able to get up to approximately 80+% of our staff working from home. Admittedly, many companies were not ready, or many companies had their business continuity plans. However, preparing for a pandemic was something that caught many of us a little bit unprepared. And yet, despite that, many have worked very closely together, not only within the industry, but with various stakeholders. We have our telcos, our power generations providers that have been there to help support the migration or transition of many of our workforce from the office to their homes. We also want to thank the different government agencies, PEZA, the Department Philippine Export Zone Authority, the Department of Labor and Employment, DOLE, the Department of Trade and Industry, and many other government institutions that have been helpful and very cooperative and allowing us the opportunity to continue and operate almost as a business as usual mode or a BAU mode. As Ray mentioned to you, we are operating at almost a little more than 80% of our capabilities and businesses. Productivity levels have also increased as many have gotten used to and transitioned towards the work from home model. And many of our support services as well, whether that's recruitment and training and many others, have been able to optimize the digital platform. And we continue to try to look at ways and means that we can improve and see what we can do using this as the new normal. Over the next few months, as we have in Metro Manila moved towards the GCQ General Community Quarantine format, we see many of our businesses continuing to work from home over the next few months. There will be a few who will try to be bringing their staff back on site, but because of many healthcare concerns, many of our members are limiting the number of folks that can come to the office. We see that over the next few months, majority of our workforce will continue to work from home. And as a result of that, we would be adapting new measures, new models as a result of this new normal. Post COVID-19, I think when many of us come back, when this is all sorted out, I think we'll see a very new normal. I don't think in the past, many of our business models required us to work in the offices on site. I think post the crisis, as many others are looking at it, we see many of our companies, many of our members will adapt a new model a new model where there will be more folks working from home as in the past, but then different kinds of models will evolve, and they will suit the different needs of our businesses. I want to take this chance to thank the government institutions who've been there, who've been flexible, who've been very responsive to a lot of the things private sector has been trying to do to help adapt to this new environment. And on that note, I just want to say thank you. I'll turn it over back to you, Jeff.
If I come off of mute, you can hear me better. Thank you, Roger. That was a very informative feedback. As you know, I've been an active member at HIMAP for many, many years, and it's been a personal place for me. So I've enjoyed seeing the growth where it's all gone, and I think it's really safe to say that the health information management sector is not only considerably more encompassing and tenured than most people realize, it is definitely a significant contributor to the future of the global industry. So, and I think that's the main message we want to get across here today. There are significant players in this field that have been here for many, many years, and in just recent years, we're really starting to see the sector grow up. So I think the message is if you're not here now, get here soon, because people are coming.
That's right. Thank you, Jeff.
So now that we've heard from government and from the industry association heads, let's go to an actual on-the-ground operator for her perspective. Jessica has over 10 years experience in business transformation, strategy, innovation, business intelligence, operations management within the Philippines shared services and BPO industry. Having worked with mid to large size global organizations in shipping, logistics, transformation, and medical technology, Jessica is a passionate people leader who has a proven track record of delivering organizational change and transformation through shared services, operational excellence, and global program management. In November 2018, Jessica joined the medical technology company Dexcom as a senior director and site leader to once again support the business growth and transformation by starting up its global business services function in Manila. Within 2 years, Dexcom Philippines has grown to 830 staff, supporting multiple customer-facing and back-office operations. Ladies and gentlemen, the head of International Business Operations and GBS lead for Dexcom Philippines, Ms. Jessica Shields.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you for having me here today. I have prepared some notes. I knew that we would spend quite a bit of time early on in this discussing the industry background, so you would have a lot of data to consider. So today I'm going to really focus on talking about the people and our experience in the years of doing business in the Philippines. As mentioned, I've been here for over 10 years now, and this is the third shared service center that I've been involved in starting up. And that's something which for me, I'm very passionate about. I'm passionate about being able to start businesses here because I've seen several times over how effective this model can be in helping organizations to grow. If we want to jump along to the next slide. Great, thank you. Just a little bit about Dexcom and their experience here so far. So we first came to the Philippine market in November 2018 with a view to starting a multifunctional shared service center that would support the organization's growth. And as you can see from the chart here, we went through a significant period of growth in 2019. I want to highlight the fact that in Q1 and Q2 of this year, that growth continued. So despite the challenges which we've faced over the past few months, with the support of industry partners, Ray, Rogelio, and a number of other organizations within that network, who and also our colleagues in the Philippine government, we've been able to continue to grow. Hasn't been without its challenges, but that's been the same situation that we've seen across the globe. So it is it's been wonderful to be able to be a part of continuing to grow Dexcom and the Philippine market despite the challenges that we faced. So I want to speak quickly to why Dexcom chose the Philippines. So we went through a process of actually looking at a number of different markets, and there were a few things which stood out to us about why we wanted to do business in the Philippines. A key one was around the country's business climate, the empathy, which is naturally built in here. Obviously, being a healthcare company, as many of us are, we need to make sure that frontline customer support carries some of those same cultural elements that we have. It's also been something which has helped us speed to competency. So both from a employees speaking with patient experience, but also in terms of assimilating our people, our staff here on the ground with our US organization. We were able to very quickly bring together the two different ways of working, the two different structures, and that allowed us to go on this aggressive growth throughout 2019. One of the other benefits that we saw here, obviously we have labor arbitrage. We see scale and agility as two things that here in the Philippines we were able to take advantage of. Being one of the more recent companies to move into the market here, the maturity of the market, the different players who were already established, who had built the competency within their organizations, we were able to partner with a number of these organizations to make sure that we could find the talent we needed, but also to navigate setting up so quickly. And I keep referring back to that because of the growth process that we went through. Speed to being able to set up and finding talent for us was critical. And when we talk about that talent, the maturity of the industry and that empathy became two critical elements that we were very much focused on making sure that we could find that matched our business requirements. Aside from the differences that we saw from a financial perspective in terms of labor arbitrage, the other financial elements became quite a significant element for us in terms of being able to reduce our reduced operating costs and PE costs that we had as an organization. But talent became more than that for us as well. When we looked at our growth globally, we know that we can utilize the Philippines as a hub. We can be taking talent from our organization here and utilizing that as part of our growth strategy around the globe. There's an investment involved in this. Judy, who is on the call today, has been working closely with us to identify the skills, the talent that we need to develop here, and then how that plays a part in our future roadmaps and how the organization develops. Finally, I wanted to speak a little bit to how or our experiences during the pandemic. And it of course hasn't been an easy process, but and the fluidity of what we've been working through, I think both Ray and Rogelio highlighted in their presentations that experience over the course of the past 90 days. What really stood out to us was the support that we received from IBPAP, local government organizations, PLDT, Globe, Smart, our technology providers, who were very quick to adapt their models to enable us to work from home. We had forums set up with the GICC and IBPAP, so we were able to have a dialogue, an industry dialogue with the IATF to get the BPO industry recognized as an essential service. And I think that speaks a lot to the partnership, the strategic partnership that we have as an industry with the government, and the support for enabling us to continue to grow during this, this challenging time. From a productivity perspective, we were very quickly able to get our productivity back to around 80%. What we actually saw with some functions is that productivity moved above what we'd seen previously in the office. Not sure if that's a good thing, but we have continued to see that trend. And now as we go back and talk to our people about a stable long-term work from home environment, we're seeing that they're adapting to it, and they want to stay in this environment that they're in at the moment, across different pockets and different processes. So it's been a very, despite the challenges, we've learned a lot during this, and I think there will be some permanent changes to the way we operate as a business now, based on the learnings that we've had so far. So on that note, I'll hand back over to Jeff. We have some time during the Q&A, and I'll be happy to answer any questions about more specific to our experiences on the ground, or my experience here over the past 10 years. Certainly been a positive one. And I also want to thank the Ambassador, Under Secretary, and Jeff for having me here today.
Great. Well, thank you, Jessica. I got to just say, wow, it's an impressive story. I mean, obviously, we've got industry heads, government, you know, we're going to say all the positive things. I mean, that's our job, but to really kind of hear it straight from someone who's been there and doing it, and to see an increase of, you know, over 800 heads in just 2 years' time, I think is pretty significant, especially with the challenges that are ongoing today. The main takeaway for me was the maturity of the market, I think, has helped enable that for you, right? The support services and different things. So I think very, very important and very critical. And anyway, we don't have a whole lot of time left, and we got a lot of questions. I've been seeing they've been flowing in via the chat channels. So let's try and get ourselves onto that. So we've concluded our presentations for today. Let's jump right into the Q&A session. So is everybody here? Yes, I see. Okay, we're all great. Some of these questions are going to be directed towards one individual or another, but please, if you have your inputs or comments, please feel free to jump in and give them to us. Question number one I have is for you, Secretary, and it's a bit of a tough one, so I guess we're just starting right out the gate. We're going to start out with some good questions. What measures and mitigating programs does the national and local government units have in place to support and assist small businesses towards economic recovery? Since the pandemic has a global economic impact, how much time and money will the Philippines economy require to be at its pre-pandemic level? And the third part of the question is, due to the exhaustion of fluid capital by almost all kinds of businesses, what kind of capital resources will the Philippines be turning into? More loans from other countries, bonds, and how much deeper will the peso value go down within the next 2 to 3 years? So I warned you, they're tough. So.
Indeed, Jeff, these are tough questions. But very early on during at the start of the pandemic, what the government has done is essentially to provide some sort of a wage subsidy. In effect, the social amelioration program that the government has implemented provided resources for the employees who are not able to work to receive something from government, essentially along the lines of about 4,000 to 8,000 pesos per month. But of course, that cannot be sustained forever. In fact, we're at the second tranche of the social amelioration program, which is also why it's very important for us to open up the economy. If you read your media reports today, just this morning, you would see that our Department of Finance, our Secretary of Finance, has already said that the Philippines, because of the hard lockdown that we implemented early on since March 16, over the 100 days, we are now at a position of opening up the economy. Now, in addition to that, I mentioned earlier that there are stimulus packages that are being discussed now in the Congress. The House version, or the House of Representatives version, stands at about 1.3 trillion pesos over 2 years, while the Senate version is a bit more modest. That's only about 270 billion pesos for 1 year. So this would be in the form of, again, wage subsidies There are also assistance by way of interest-free loans to companies that are tied to being able to retain at least 90% of your workers. There's also a component that would include equity investments to distressed companies. So all of these are packaged in the form of stimulus packages. But I would say, let me also say that the Philippines remains very responsible when it comes to managing still our deficit. This is very important because we are looking at the being able to access, as was mentioned by the question earlier, being able to access loans at very low even concessional rates. Being able to manage your deficit is important for you to get very low interest rates. So that's why there's also emphasis still on having a responsible deficit to GDP ratio. I think our deficit to GDP ratio after all of the stimulus packages would come out to about 9% of GDP. That would also bring us to about the middle of where the other countries in the ASEAN region would be. So there.
Okay. Does anyone else from our panel have any inputs on? I know Roger Himap, I know, has got a lot of SME membership. Have we got feedback from the members and what they think of government support or what's happening or what they would like to see?
Thanks, Jeff. This is Roger here. Just this one. Most of our membership, as you know, are SMEs, and I think that will be the group that will be mostly affected. I think many of the larger players have fairly more capabilities and more resources. I think the small and medium and enterprises are those that will be affected. They're really looking at, so the government has been providing different forms of support, not only individually, but I think organizationally, our companies are also trying to do what they can to help their folks with regard to, during this period, especially during the ECQ. Many of our members have kept their employees whole. They've kept their benefits in place, provided food, provided transportation for many of those who had to go to work on site. So there are many things that the companies were doing to really help the folks. But for the medium and small enterprises, I think they're really looking to see how they need to transform their models. They're doing what they can, and are looking forward to hearing more from the government. I know there are many stimulus packages that our government is looking at to see how we can, all together help out and survive or get beyond this. Jeff.
Great. Well, thanks for that, Roger. I just to echo back to Jessica's point earlier, I think the matured market, the ability that's here, really gives an environment, especially and then with all the strong support from government, that you do what you need to, and the great thing is you're being enabled to do what you need to. So that's important that you can do those kind of things. Looking over some of the questions that have been coming in via the chat, there's a pretty common theme, which is a challenge for any of us here. And it says, and this comes from the Philippine American Chamber of Commerce. And it says, we've been helping to market BPO services to American clients and have been creating opportunities for business matching for many years to the trade missions we organize. How do we sell the Philippines BPO services now when potential customers cannot do a site visit and have face-to-face meetings with potential partners in the Philippines? And Ray, maybe you want to jump in on that one?
Thank you, Jeff, for putting me on the spot here. I guess what the pandemic taught us is really to challenge everything that we have held through before the pandemic. In the case, for example, of our ability to do work from home at scale, we haven't done that before, right? I would argue that while capabilities were available early on, that wasn't the norm. It was more of an exception. And I think, related to the question that has just been asked, we also need to challenge that the fact that, the traditional means by which we get our messages across will still be the only means by which we will be able to achieve those. I think for one, what we are doing now is already one great example of how we can do this. And again, the other thing that I would also want to point out is that I personally believe that this is not permanent. At some point, we will be able to overcome this crisis that we are in. A cure and a vaccine will be available. Travel will become available again, and we should be able to have a blended approach of virtual and physical interaction to bring the message home.
Okay, excellent. Sorry, I'm trying to multitask and I'm not that good at it. So on to the next question that we've got. Roger, this one comes directly for you. I think this is more of a healthcare focused one. It is an interest one. The U.S. federal government is expected to appropriate increasing funds to expand and sustain private sector efforts to contain the epidemic and prevent a recurrence. This includes federal funding, including for the National Institute of Health, private sector-led clinical trials in support of new vaccines and therapeutics. What competencies could the local industry, HIMAP in particular, put to bear to taking advantage of and the resulting opportunities for this, for clinical research, that type of thing? So essentially, the U.S. is going to be investing. How can HIMAP member companies help?
Sure, Jeff. Thanks for that question. I think it's a very good question. I think through this past 90 days, we've seen some of our members repurpose some of their resources, people, to handle the COVID-19 crisis. So we've seen existing players repurpose, whether that's a call, whether that's a case, a medical case, whether it's a claim or a process. We've seen them repurpose teams along those lines. So that's the immediate responsive of existing players, and they've been able to do that. But in addition to that, we see growth also happening as support services for COVID-19. So that's another area where they're trying to see how we can add value to our clients. Okay, so that's one set. The other point I was thinking, and we were talking about, was the clinical research outsourcing group. As you know, one of the Philippine clinical research outsourcing group of the Philippines, they've partnered with HIMAP as part of our organization, and they're trying to look together with others in the industry how they can support and help in the clinical research of not just the vaccines, but even the antivirals and what different types of forms to help on the situation. Admittedly, Jeff, our clinical research association or organization in the Philippines would like to do a lot more than what they're doing right now. But I'm sure when we had the opportunity to speak with them and conversations, were really looking to see how they can increase their help with regard to clinical research support. So those are just, I think, 2 or 3 examples of how our players are doing so. I think what we'd also like to share is for opportunities for investors to look at the Philippines as an area where they can build these capabilities, build these support services here in the country. We've realized through the years, and we've seen in the timeline that Jessica has provided and shared, and how also Ray has shared how the industry has grown in business process outsourcing. We realized that it is when you cooperate and work closely with your local partner or your Philippine operation, when you work closely, when the host countries work closely, when their teams work closely with their partners in the Philippines, they are able to create and build capabilities. When many of these companies started in the Philippines, we were just taking very simple calls, simple processes. But through the years, it's been able to handle more because of the cooperation and working together. That has really helped build this throughout time. And we'll see more of that, Jeff. I think we'll see more of that develop throughout time, and hoping and encouraging many of our members in the audience today to try to take a look and see what the opportunities are out there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Roger. Actually, I think you're absolutely 100% right. The main limitation we have is our own selves. If I want to steal a line from a Disney movie, I think it's really limited to your imagination, right? We have a very deep talent pool. You've got a very mature market. It's really bringing these things together and just determining where you're seeing opportunities and stepping up to those. Jessica, just kind of backtails onto here again, the mature market aspects. So I got another question that came in, and I want to be careful. We don't want to fall into name calling, but at the same point in time, this is a Philippine webinar. So the question is why the Philippines over other countries, essentially, and what made it stand out?
Yep. So I think for us, when we were looking at a number of different markets, I won't name which, we knew that we had labor arbitrage. It's clearly a critical factor for us from a finance perspective. But then when we go a level deeper than that and we consider as a fast-growing organization, we wanted to make sure that we did not spend a significant amount of time looking at how to bring our culture together as a Californian company to match that with a market that could also have the same cultural nuances. So we found that made the Philippines stand out more, especially because of the voice-based services and the patient interaction that we had. That was one clear factor. The empathy and the cultural fit drove that was the defining difference between others who still had a similar labor arbitrage position. There was also the fact that the Philippines does have such strong ties to the United States. And we found that from an industry perspective, the industry was so tight. So when we talk about our relationships with IBPAP, HEMAP, the GICC, we could leverage upon these groups really quickly. And there was, to an extent, a sharing of best practices and information within that group. We didn't see that with some other markets to the same extent as we've seen it here. But in terms of those, I spoke to the maturity of the market. And while some of my colleagues in the health industry here won't like me saying this, we knew that we could come into the market and that as a smaller, agile player, we could take advantage of some of the larger organizations who already had that natural churn that comes with a mature market. So we could grow at the rate that we needed to, at that aggressive rate, and become a player within a market without disrupting the entire market.
Okay, great. Thank you. Excellent. Ray, I'm going to come to you, and again, I always like keeping the tough ones for you. So I'm going to take three questions and kind of bring them all together, and I think you'll see that they blend. So hopefully it'll make sense. One question was regarding is what is the total FTE count in the Philippines? And I know we've published numbers, but have they been impacted by what's going on? Another one is the new model impact that we're talking about now with all the work from home. What are your thoughts on the impact of that to the going forward real estate market? And then lastly, the same, what are the impacts from that to the employees and to the work, the people working here from a work-life balance perspective? So there's three different questions all kind of molded into one.
Yeah, the work from home arrangement has really tested many of the old held traditions for the industry. Especially if, for example, you look at the voice sector, where we predominantly have large operators who had been used to on-site, on-premise, primarily based operations. And we had to test all of these issues. We realized that there is a blend of work from home and on-site premise arrangement that can in fact work. Now, obviously the road to getting to where we are at right now isn't straightforward. Over the past 3 months, we had to overcome many challenges. And I think I just want to call out that I don't think achieving 100% work from home is a realistic goal, because we do have certain constraints that we also need to operate against. For one, some of our clients have, confidentiality considerations information security considerations that simply do not lend to a work from home setup. And that's why if we look at it from that angle, and while the jury is still out, I think where it will come down to in the next few months is that we will see more of a blended model. Now, for obvious reasons, many other companies are taking it slow in terms of pushing the button in terms of going back to the workplace. And they measure the pace by which they will do that in terms of months rather than weeks, which I think is a good conservative exercise. But at the same time, for companies where we do need to expand our productive numbers while putting in central consideration the welfare of our employees, we will continue to provide ways by which social distancing and the appropriate health actions being made at the workplace. And my sense here, Jeff, is that in the near term, there will be some pressure in terms of growing the real estate market. Although one would be surprised to note that in the face of pandemic, we've also booked quite a bit of new real estate as an industry. And in fact, we are taking on easily 47% right now of total demand. Although the demand as a whole is 50% less than what it used to be, the IT-BPO sector is easily taking on 47% of that, which is a huge and a substantial take.
Great. No, we've always been a leader in that regard. And again, I think that's one of the main factors why governments acknowledge us for what we are. We are a big contributor. I mean, in the FTE count, over 1 million direct employed and revenue that kind of comes in from it. So certainly you can see why we get a little bit of extra attention. I think it's deserved. We are a significant contributor to the economy. You brought up a kind of segues into the next question, and I'm sorry, Yusuf Perry, I haven't been ignoring you. It's just the questions have been leading this way. But this one's coming to you. There's a question regarding, as Ray had said about real estate. We also know that there's been changes in regards to PEZA, as regards to is it going to be, not allowed in metro and because we're trying to foster growth towards the provincial areas. Maybe you can comment on that and then how that relates into the now just recently released 2025 New Digital Cities project. That highlights, among others, the unique position as an archipelago and pandemic sanctuary. So maybe you can kind of give us a little input on what you think from the digital cities and PEZA regards for the industry. Yeah, I think you hit mute.
It's not directed to me, Jeff. Sorry, I'm very sorry. I thought it was.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, that was directed to you. Okay. In regards to comments on the current state of PEZA, where we're at with it from a Metro Manila aspect, to talk about growth. I mean, and from an industry attraction level, and then also how that segues and feeds into the 2025 New Digital Cities projects.
Okay. From the government perspective, the objective really is to push development out of Metro Manila. Although we do recognize that there is an imperative for businesses to still be in Metro Manila, particularly for showcase projects. So I've mentioned earlier in my slide that there were 9 new IT zones, which were just recently approved, maybe just about 2 weeks ago, approved by Malacanang, and this included those within very near to Metro Manila. And now for the digital cities, the DICT together with IBPOP launched just this Tuesday, the Digital Cities 2025 program. It's actually a 5-year program that identified cities that will be prioritized for internet connectivity and digital education for talent pool. What this would bring us is that it would really allow us to expand the geographical scope of where BPOs could be. This would include areas such as Balanga City, Batangas City, Cabanatuan, and so on and so forth. But the basic objective is to really push out the development out of Metro Manila. But still, let me also cite that we have an investment priorities plan that is for signing by the President, which would still allow BPOs to be registered within Metro Manila.
Great, excellent. Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, myself, and I know I'm moderator, but I can't help myself. I'll comment. I mean, we see that when new people come into country, obviously you want to kind of be in the Metro Manila area. It's known, and then we find that they tend to, evolve more towards the provincial areas versus initial setups in the provincial areas. So that's always been a challenge for us, I think, as we look forward to go through with it. Here's a question. I think it kind of goes out to the Roger, Ray, Jessica, all three of you, whoever wants to kind of jump in first. It's an interesting question, and Jessica, I think you touched on it earlier. For a BPO company seeking to grow its manpower from 20 to 50 people, what is the best way? We're looking for agents that have automotive knowledge and the ability to do sales over the phone, and we're not sure how to hunt for such talent. So, anyone of you want to pick that up?
There's a few different ways that I would recommend doing it. The first would be to look at your partnerships, as I mentioned, that with the industry bodies that you're working with can tell you a little bit more about where that talent is, where it's available right now, and also freely give you information about, okay, is your offering at par with the market as it stands right now. Once you get a sense of how big the talent pool is for the specific need that you want, I've always tended to take a two-step approach. If you need to grow aggressively, then there's part of it is picking up the talent from the other organizations who might be part of their natural churn, especially if you're seeing elements of the industry that are 5,000 or 6,000 people. There is that natural churn in a mature market. You might be able to offer something different because of your geographical position. So leverage on that, and then also looking at what you can develop internally to balance that. So maybe picking up fresh graduates, which is going to be 10% of what you're doing, or those with less experience, and also some more. There's also a number of really great recruitment partners who you can work with as well. And I'm sure Rogelio and Ray can tell you some more about that.
Sure.
I mean, if I could add to that, Jeff, I think Jessica really hit the mark when she said, you need to be very precise in terms of your requirements, because that requirement will drive the strategy that will be available to you. And as an example, scaling from 0 to 100 will be different in comparison to scaling from 500 to 10,000, right? And the strategy will vary depending on the scale that you're looking at, and also the discipline. I mean, even until now, I feel that we are, as an example, not really doing justice in terms of scaling our capabilities in IT. We're very strong in voice, very strong in BPO, but for whatever reason, we are not viewed as a location for IT services. And I'd like to disprove that point based on my own experience. I don't think it's unknown to many. I came from, and I'm advertising this company, Accenture. And I joined Accenture when we were 300 persons strong here in the Philippines 20 years ago. And just before I retired 3 years ago, we grew 5,000% in IT. So the scale is available. And even if you look at the level of complexity that is being done, it's 70% digital now. So I think what it shows is that the Philippines is really rich in talent. And for as long as there is a focused approach in terms of how you will grow yourself and have a strategy in terms of where you will grow even. And it's very fitting that we talked about Digital Cities 2025 a while ago, because how we have grown in the countryside was a feature of how successful we were in driving the next wave cities, which is the precursor of the Digital Cities 2025. And our ability to scale these new locations and improve the infrastructure, work with local government, and address the talent pool, which is very abundant, by the way, in these locations. I think the options will be immense for anybody who will choose the Philippines as a premier location to base their operations in.
Great. Roger, did you have any commentary or?
Sure. Just wanna chime in, but basically, Jessica and Ray have really covered a lot of the material. I think in addition to that, especially if you're trying to implement things like this in this COVID-19 period right now, I think there are many digital platforms and social media platforms that you can use if you want to hire, even looking through, LinkedIn, Glassdoor, what have you. There are many different formats. There are the digital formats that you can use to look for your staff, but as Ray pointed out, it has to be very clear and precise what you want to do. And to Jessica's point, there's also different associations you can check just to get a feel, just to do a litmus test of what's available out there. One thing we realize is that in these markets, you will see people, you will see the talent, but you do have to do some training to customize them to the needs that you would have. Because typically you're looking at three things. When people come to the market, they have what you call an industry standard. You have your industry standard for the industry you work in. Secondly, you have a technology standard, the technology platforms that you use, that you work with to be able to do the work and outsource the work. And then lastly, the business standard. Your business is unique. You have your own secret sauce. You have your own unique proprietary processes. And those obviously will have to be trained by your teams. So yeah, echoing the messages of Jessica and Ray, I just think they're traditional platforms and they're digital platforms to be able to do these things. Hope that helps, Jeff. Thank you.
Great. No. Very important.
Jeff.
Thank you for all of you. We're butting up on time.
Jeff, sorry.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Just quick. If I may just also add some inputs
certainly.
on that question, just very quickly, because labor arbitrage and talent is very important for the industry. 17% unemployment, that's the current unemployment rate that we have. So that also means that there are talent around that are looking for work. In particular, the hardest hit would be the manufacturing sector. We could link you up with these companies where unemployment would be abounding. And second, OFW, overseas Filipino workers and professionals returning to the Philippines with good cultural nuance knowledge, language, and professional skill set. That would be a platform for BPO companies that would try to also penetrate the countries where our OFWs and overseas Filipino professionals would be coming from. So thank you, Jeff.
No, thank you very much. Actually, that was a very, very important call out. The OFW, the overseas Filipino worker. We reference it all the time in healthcare because when we approach an American or U.S. audience and then talk about what we have to offer, we ask how many of them know Filipinos, and basically with the response is, if you've ever been in a hospital, you know a Filipino, right? And there's just so many nurses. The industry is just so heavily engaged. So I think that's a very important point to call out. All around the world, because of the pandemic effects, we're seeing a lot of Filipinos are coming back home, and they're bringing some interesting skill sets with them from jobs they were doing while they were overseas. So that could very much play.
400,000.
Yeah, and Jeff, if I may just very quickly add, we are in fact already working with DOLE precisely on a program to leverage this additional talent pool extension that is accessible to us, the returning OFWs. So that discussion is in progress because we do recognize that many professionals they would have the nuanced ability in terms of culture affinity from where they're coming from. And certainly that's one talent pool that we would like to tap into.
Okay, well, again, it's been a great session. As always, there's never enough time. I think we've covered quite a bit of stuff. And again, thank you for all of your contributions. Thank you to Jessica, to Ray, to Roger, and of course to USEC Perry. DTI has been our major sponsor for this. So thank you all very much. I'm going to give us a quick recap, but as far as all of you, for all your speakers, again, thank you for your time and your valuable inputs. So to summarize and to recap, we opened the session with a very inspired message from the Philippine ambassador to the United States of America, the Honorable Jose Manuel Romualdez. And I think it was very important. He pointed out that COVID has accelerated the adoption of technology. I mean, while the entire country and industry is really heavily based on technology, I think it's a very important call out that COVID has really kind of forced our hand to kind of adopt it a little bit sooner and to do more with it. And we're expanding now the capabilities into the provincial areas And that was kind of echoed in the conversations we had about our Digital Cities 2025 report that came out. That was followed by the Undersecretary of the Department of Trade and Industry, Yusek Perry, and his informative presentation on the Philippine business climate. He as well kind of pointed out that the strong pre-COVID financial environment contributed by the BPO industry and a quick response and action has enabled the Philippines to keep key businesses operating. And that was segue right into Ray's comments as well, that when he was talking about how working together with government and industry, we can certainly do the things that need to be done to kind of keep things running. And I think we end up impressing ourselves and finding out we can do it a lot faster than we thought we could. So really, Ray talked more about how the industry had stepped up to the challenge to keep business running in a safe and secure environment, and of course with support from government, and more importantly, a very tenacious, strong-willed Filipino workforce that is pretty much up for any challenge that we can throw at them. In the past, we've dealt with minor little things like hurricanes and typhoons, and now we've kind of stepped the ante up and we went to a whole global pandemic, and we still kind of really stepped up to the challenge. So I think that was very important, and it's another reason to say why you want to be here and how we want to kind of go forward with things. And then Roger Salazar expanded on just how significant the Philippine HIM support sector is to the global market and how its unparalleled allied health educated workforce in the country's IT-BPO framework make it the destination for HIM services for the foreseeable future. There was a very valid question that Roger threw out there, and we discussed a little bit, but what will the post-COVID work world look like? How are people going to be? I agree with Ray. I don't think we're going to be 100% work from home, but what portion of work from home are we going to be? How are we going to handle things going forward? And how are we going to be prepared for the next one, right? There's always going to be something else. And then finally, Ms. Jessica Shields provided us with an inspiring and encouraging example of how the Philippines not only provided her company with the needed human resources to grow, but was also at the ready with government and industry association support when it proved the most valuable. I think a big takeaway from her discussions for me was the cultural fit, the empathy, the collaborative and mature working environment is really what kind of gave her company the tools they needed to succeed and grow rather fast. So that's it for us today. That concludes our webinar on Philippine IT business process outsourcing opportunities, global business processes powered by the Philippines. We hope you're able to take away some beneficial information and or insights from today's session. And if you have any additional questions or would like further information, please contact the Philippine Department of Trade and Industry, and then you'll see all the information is there on your screen. So thank you very much. Please enjoy the rest of your evening, and in advance happy Independence Day to all of you joining us from the United States of America. Good day.
Thank you, everyone.